everybody, and welcome to an all-new, exciting edition of the Geno in the Evening program exclusively on Comcast Channel 15 and simultaneously streaming live to Facebook. I am, of course, your host, Connecticut's only conversing cowboy, hard-hitting Geno Cuddy. Now, tonight, we're going to be discussing a film from my childhood that I feel is not only criminally underrated, but unjustly forgotten. 1939 was a golden year for cinema. There were many films, great films that were released in that year. Such films as Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, even some great romantic classics such as Made for Each Other with James Stewart and Carole Lombard. But there also was a film released in that year that was to be only the second full-length animated feature film released here in America. And that film is 1939's Gulliver's Travels, produced by the esteemed Fleischer Studios. So I'm going to do my best to discuss this film and bring up possibly why it's forgotten now, and why it should be remembered. And I'm also going to be discussing the creators of the project, the Fleischer brothers. Now, more specifically, let's talk about Max Fleischer. Max Fleischer was, by this point, a veteran cartoonist. He had started he was actually an emigre from Poland, and he established himself in New York, and it was from there that he started his short cartoon series Out of the Inkwell, featuring his creation Coco the Clown. Now, these cartoons were actually very innovative at the time, because they were really the first cartoons to combine live action with animation. And they were also innovative because there was a new process invented for these films, a process that was patented by Max Fleischer himself called rotoscoping. Now, rotoscoping is the process of tracing live action movement into animated form. So, for example, and partly this process contributed to Gulliver itself. And there was, this process entailed taking live action footage and frame by frame tracing it into live action form. I actually do have an example of a short little clip from one of these Max Fleischer Out of the Inkwell cartoons. These are actually from the silent era, from the 1910s all the way up until the late 1920s. It ran for quite a long time. And one of them was a short called Fishing. And here's a clip from that cartoon to further illustrate what I'm trying to convey. You'll see a lot of interesting techniques here that were pioneered and invented for this particular set of cartoons. So here is a clip from this Coco the Clown cartoon, Fishing. Now, the man that you saw in that clip was none other than Max Fleischer himself. The theme of these short Out of the Inkwell cartoons was pretty much that, almost of a Frankenstein concept. Or more specifically, the concept put into place by such tales of Jewish folklore as Der Golem. What's interesting about this is that Max Fleischer himself was actually a man of Jewish descent. So parts of me wonder if he was influenced by these folk tales of his youth, and he wanted to sort of make films of that same nature. And because in many of the Coco the Clown Out of the Inkwell shorts, you see Coco the Clown turning on his creator and creating nothing but mischief and mayhem for his creator. Some of my favorite shorts are when Coco unleashes himself into the real world. I think some of my favorite ones were where they went to Mars, where Coco, was almost going to destroy the world. A lot of very, very interesting and innovative shorts. So I highly recommend, if you're at all interested in the history or the art of animation, or just want to see some really great cartoons and shorts from the silent era, I highly recommend you guys checking out the Out of the Inkwell shorts. A lot of them are on YouTube, available for free to watch. So I think you should check some of them out. Now, after the 20s had ended, the Fleischers got involved with the Paramount motion picture studio, and they had started work on a batch of sound cartoons. Now, these were actually some of the first sound cartoons ever put on film. There's a big misconception out there that Walt Disney was the first person to create sound cartoons and sound animation. That is simply not the case, because Max Fleischer partnered up with Leah DeForest, I believe in about 1925 to 26, and created some of the first song cartoons, is what they were called back in the day. And he also innovated the what became popular, the Follow the Bouncing Ball sing-along effect. He popularized that. But for many, Max Fleischer's greatest creation would come in the 1930s. And that creation was none other than the girl who is made of pen and ink. She will win you with a wink. Ain't she cute? Boop, boop, a doop, sweet Betty. That's right, Max Fleischer, and his creation there was Betty Boop. Now, here's something that a lot of people don't know about Betty Boop. Betty Boop initially, in about 1931, she debuted in a cartoon, a talk cartoon, which they were called at that time, called Dizzy Dishes. And from her initial appearance, I'd say up until about Bimbo's Initiation, which was a cartoon released, I believe, in around 1932, excuse me, she was actually a canine. Yes, Betty Boop started out her life as a dog, quite hilariously enough. And she, of course, is now world recognized as a sex symbol. You can't really go anywhere without seeing Betty Boop nowadays. From steering wheel covers to bobbleheads, she's practically everywhere. World known icon. Created by Max Fleischer. As you see there, you see Max Fleischer with Betty Boop in hand, his famous creation there. And in 1933, Max Fleischer signed a deal with L.C. Chrysler Seeger and the King Feature Syndicate to bring Seeger's popular comic strip character of Popeye the Sailor to the screen. As you see right there, that's a screenshot from 1932's Beware of Barnacle Bill, which is one of the great early, which actually no, that's from 1934, I believe. That's one of the great early Popeye the Sailor cartoons back when he was voiced by William Costello before Jack Mercer stepped in. And of course, the Popeye cartoon series is known to be the longest running theatrical cartoon series ever produced, running for, I believe, an astounding 256 shorts between the Fleischer Studios proper and later on when it became absorbed and turned into Famous Studios. And interestingly enough about Popeye, he was actually the proposed star of the feature film we are going to be discussing today. In 1934, Max Fleischer went to the heads of Paramount Pictures and tried to sell them on an idea to make a feature-length animated film. The Fleischers were already gearing up to go in that direction because of Popeye the Sailor here on screen. They had produced 3 extra long short films, longer than any other animated film, at least in America at that time. And those 3 films were Popeye the Sailor Meets Sinbad the Sailor in 1936, Popeye the Sailor Meets Alibaba's 40 Thieves in 1937, and lastly, Aladdin and His Wonderful Lamp in 1938. These films would often be billed above the feature films that they originally accompanied back in the 1930s, and they wound up breaking all box office records. And I believe Popeye the Sailor Meets Sinbad the Sailor was actually nominated for an Academy Award for Best Cartoon Short, unfortunately losing out to what I feel is an inferior work, that being the Disney short Silly Symphony short, The Country Cousin. So this proposed feature in 1934 was actually supposed to be an adaptation of Peter Pan. Yes, if Max Fleischer had his way, it would have been his Peter Pan that we would be remembering today, but unfortunately that wasn't in the cards. Another story that Max Fleischer had been interested in was the Jonathan Swift novel, Gulliver's Travels. Originally known, get ready for this title, ladies and gentlemen, originally known as Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World, by Lemuel Gulliver, first a surgeon, then a captain of several ships, later shortened to Gulliver's Travels. Thank God for title shortening. Because he had always, when he was a little kid, he was always fascinated with this story, and he primarily wanted to focus on the first half of the story, where the main title character was traveling and going through the town of Lilliput, where all the characters are no bigger than his thumb. Unfortunately, in 1934, Paramount vetoed this idea, thinking that nobody would ever go and see a feature-length animated feature film. A feature-length animated film. Little did they know what Disney came out with in 1937. In 1937, Walt Disney came out with the very influential Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And that was a film that broke all box office records, became a hit sensation all around the world. And it was at this point where Paramount Pictures had said to the Fleischers, okay, this film did so well, you could finally go out there and make the feature that you wanted. So Fleischer, drawing back upon this Gulliver's Travels idea, decided to go into production on this new extravagant feature. Now, it's worthy to mention that none of the Fleischer animators or anybody who had ever worked at Fleischer, besides people like Grim Natwick, Seamus Culhane, and Pinto Colvig, who worked on the Snow White feature for Disney, Fleischer had acquired them. None of them had ever worked on a feature-length animated film before. So this was to be a completely new venture for pretty much all the parties involved. And so at that point, Paramount decided that they would move the Fleischers from their New York City studios, their Manhattan studios, and moved them down to a new state-of-the-art facility in Miami, Florida. Now, when this facility was built, it was thought to be one of the biggest animation studios at that time. And but what soon happened was that building filled up quick. There were reportedly about 800 employees that filled those halls of the Fleischer Studios down there in Miami, Florida. And it soon became very congested, and they had to make sure that the air conditioning was on properly because of the fact that it got very hot down there during the times that they were working on this film. And they required so many employees that they actually went around to various art schools in Miami and started animation classes to lure people over to the studio so that they could help produce this film. They only had about an 18-month production period because they had to meet a Christmas 1939 deadline. That was when the feature was proposed to be released, and it was very, very grueling. They only had a budget of about $700,000, which nowadays may not seem like much, but back then was a considerable amount of money for a film that was really a risk. I mean, there was no telling if this film would sell well. And there's no telling if this film would be a box office success or a box office failure. So this was a very risky investment for not only Paramount Pictures, but the Fleischer Studios as well. But luckily enough, and there was a lot of turmoil too during this production. Many times they were considering canceling it, but they stuck it through. And on December 22nd, 1939, all around the world, all around the country, audiences finally got to see Max Fleischer's first feature-length cartoon in gorgeous three-dimensional Technicolor, Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver, enjoyed a wild success. It went around the world, became popular in pretty much every country that it had played in, and it actually did earn quite a princely sum for Paramount. It earned, I remember hearing about approximately $3.7 million at the box office, so certainly made back all of its money. The unfortunate thing about this is that the Fleischers went over budget on the film, and because of that, Paramount held them to a $350,000 penalty. And this was the beginning of the financial struggles that the Fleischer Studios would face. Unfortunately, this ultimately caused their undoing. After the success of Gulliver's Travels, they actually had produced several short subjects featuring one of the characters from the film, Gabby, the town crier. Gabby, interestingly enough, was voiced by none other than Pinto Colvig. Now, Pinto Colvig, for those of you who don't know, was actually the voice of a couple of the dwarves in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I believe he had voiced Sleepy, and I believe he has also voiced Grumpy. But he's most well known as the original voice of their famous character, Goofy. And so in 1937 or 38, he actually emigrated down to Miami, Florida to do voice work for Gabby, the town crier. Now, here's an interesting thing about Pinto Colvig's Gabby voice. One day, doing a bit of an experiment, I took a sound clip of Gabby's voice and actually slowed it down. And if you listen to it slowed down, it actually is Pinto Colvig's Goofy voice. So there's a little thing for you folks to do at home there. If you're ever bored and you want to fiddle around in Audacity, you can go ahead and take a sound clip from a Gabby cartoon and try and slow it down, and so you can hear Pinto Colvig's wonderful Goofy voice. Now, unfortunately, from all accounts, these short films did not do as well at the box office. And most exhibitors hated them because they were considered poison. Because people did not really warm to the Gabby character. In my personal view, I love the Gabby character. I love all the characters from this film. But I can see how a character like Gabby would grow tiresome on somebody after a while. So there's that. But pretty good bunch of feature little short films. This DVD that I have actually contains most of them. A really good series of short films there. In the 1940s, the Fleischer Studios made gigantic headway through their Superman series of shorts. These were very, very pioneering works. And they were considered to be some of the most difficult animated shorts at the time. And these actually did inspire a lot of the work that went into the Batman comic strip. Bob Kane, the creator of the Batman comic strip, later said that the Fleischer Superman shorts were very, very influential to the creation of Batman. And they're still held in high regard today, and they're still some of the most enjoyable superhero animated productions to watch, especially the Fleischer product. The famous studios product that came after is more World War II heavy, and those shorts haven't dated as well, but they're still pretty good shorts to watch. But the Fleischer era is still the most preferred era of that series of short films. And in 1941, the Fleischers, because Gulliver did so well, Paramount ordered another feature to be produced, and that feature wound up being Mr. Bug Goes to Town, which was released in 1941. Now, the sad thing about Mr. Bug Goes to Town was, well, it's a really good film, and I think just as forgotten and unjustly forgotten as Gulliver, it was not released at the best time, I guess you would say. It was released a couple of days before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And because of that, a lot of people didn't want to go out and see the films. And so this film wound up being a box office bomb in theaters. And this was the film that unfortunately broke the Fleischer Studios. Around this time as well, the Fleischers, Max and Dave, they started their relationship was really strained for a variety of reasons, but mainly because of Dave Fleischer, Max's brother, who gets directorial credit on pretty much any and every Fleischer production ever produced. Dave Fleischer started to have what has been deemed very unprofessional behavior, and nowadays would be considered very unacceptable behavior. He started to have an affair with his secretary down in Miami. He started to gain a fairly large ego as well. He wanted to write the music for Mr. Bug Goes to Town. And he wanted to, he took a lot of vacation days and took a lot of time away from the studio. And Max was very upset about that because Max was an otherwise good professional. Now, I want to make this clear. Max Fleischer wasn't a good businessman by any stretch of the imagination, unfortunately. I mean, he was a great artist. Don't get me wrong. Fabulous artist. Fabulous artist. And he also was a marvelous inventor. But therein lies the problem there. His primary focus was on that of the invention and the art, and not so much on the business side of animation. And that's where people like Disney, for example, got the leg up on people like Max Fleischer. because in addition to being a talented artist and an inventor in his own right, Disney was also a very good businessman. He knew how to orchestrate deals. He knew when people were taking advantage of him. And that's why RKO, the studio who distributed the Disney films, never owned the films outright. Disney was the sole owner of those films, and that's why they're still in the popular consciousness today. Had they been under RKO's reign, who knows what would have happened. But unlike Disney, Max Fleischer and Dave both had to answer to Paramount, and they were considered actually to be employees of Paramount Pictures, and they both had to sign were forced to sign letters of resignation in about 1942, and at that point, Paramount gained control of the studio, moved back to New York, and rebranded themselves Famous Studios after their record label, Famous Players, which was their in-house record label at the time. And what became of the Miami Fleischer Studios? Well, it eventually became, of all things, a gymnasium. Then it became a daycare. And now the Fleischer Studios and the Fleischer Animation Studios in Miami, Florida, is now home to the Miami Police Station. And you can still see it today, and I believe there is a plaque there that designates that this was originally the site of Fleischer Studios. By 1957, Fleischer Studios had been long gone, and Paramount had sold all of their Fleischer content, along with their own Famous Studios produced content, to a company by the name of National Telefilm Associates, NTA. And NTA had acquired a company by the name of UM&M Television, and so they were sold to NTA. And in 1957, NTA re-released Gulliver's Travels to theaters, and that's pretty much where it stayed for years and years and years. It was a staple for kiddie matinees for years, well into the 1960s. And it also had become a television staple during the Christmas and Thanksgiving holidays. And by 1968, Gulliver's Travels had fallen into the public domain, along with a lot of other Fleischer animated short films. The only Fleischer productions that never went into public domain were, curiously, one of their color classic shorts, which was Tears of an Onion, and Mr. Bug Goes to Town. That remained under copyright, but everything else pretty much went public domain. And I remember the first time I had discovered Gulliver's Travels. It was, let me go into a bit about my story, then I'll allow people to call in. The first time I remember watching Gulliver's Travels, or at least a clip from it, was via a public access station that was actually transmitted from Europe. It was called Arts. I believe it was Arts and Entertainment, not to be confused with A&E, but I think it was called Arts and Entertainment, but I remember the logo bug just saying Arts. And I remember that they used to show symphonies, band concerts, pretty much anything and everything relating to art. And one of the clips that they showed was a clip from Gulliver's Travels. And I'm going to show that clip to you now. This is the clip that introduced me to Gulliver's Travels back, I believe, in 2000 or 2001. And this is the very haunting but also very beautiful I Hear a Dream sequence. So from 1939, Gulliver's Travels, I Hear a Dream. I was so enamored by that little snippet of Gulliver's Travels that I had to find a copy of it and watch it, and I did. My sister's library, we lived in New Britain, Connecticut at the time. My sister's library actually did have a copy of the film. This is the DVD edition of that same copy, but this is the original edition that I grew up with as a kid. I always used to rent this from the library because I loved it so much. This is the fully restored 60th anniversary limited edition of Gulliver's Travels that was released back in 1999 by Northampton Partners and Windstar Home Entertainment. This, because of the film being public domain, it had fallen into severe disrepair. But a good friend of mine by the name of Dr. Thomas R. Reich and his associates obtained a copy of a 35 millimeter print from the Fleischer family, and they restored it from the ground up. They offered 3 soundtrack options: Dolby Surround, Dolby AC3, and the original mono soundtrack. And they enhanced and color corrected the artwork. And they did a really good job. I still hold this restoration in high regard, even though there has been a restoration that has surpassed it. I do still hold the 1999 Windstar release of Gulliver's Travels in high regard, as it is the version of the film that I had grown up with. As advertised, I will allow you to call into the show. So please, if you would like to call into the show, please feel free to do so now. That number is 860-613-3031. Again, that number is 860-613-3031. I look forward to hearing from you. I would like to talk about Gulliver with you guys and talk about your memories of the film and what your thoughts are on it. Because, again, of Gulliver being public domain, there have been a lot of video editions of the film, many of which I actually do own because I love this film so much. Let me show some of them to you while we wait for people to call in to the program. These are, please excuse the box there, but these are some of the video editions that have been released of Gulliver's Travels throughout the year. Some of these are DVD, Blu-ray, but the majority of them are VHS. This is a edition from Good Times Home Entertainment. I always liked the cover on this version. I don't know why. It always struck me as beautiful. I'm a sucker for that painted Disney look of the artwork that Good Times used to do on some of their more specialized videotapes. Here's one from a company called Burbank Video. This was a company by the name of Hollywood Movie Greats, or California Video Distributors. This one was from a company calling itself Medicom Home Video. This one was from a company calling itself Memory Lane Video, which later became a company called Congress Home Video. This is from Diamond Entertainment Corporation. That one actually contains the original 1939 trailer, which is a pretty cool tape. This one is from Alpha Video. This one is from Platinum Disc Corporation. This one is from Star Classics. I like this artwork. I think this is pretty good artwork. This is another edition from Burbank Video, which was formerly known as Viking Video, and also Troy Gold. And lastly on the VHS list is this edition from Woodhaven Entertainment. That's a lot of VHS editions of one film. I will say that. but a lot of them contain different prints, different edits of the film, and that's what I look for when I collect public domain films on video, because especially ones that I really, really love, are those different edits. What's different about the film on this tape as opposed to that tape? Call me a weirdo, but that's what I like. And also, I just incredibly love this film. I have always loved this film ever since I was a kid. And, oh, we have a caller. It looked like we had a caller for a little bit there. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, this is Kyle McElroy from Shakur, Pennsylvania.
Hello there, how are you?
Oh, good. Just, I just wanted to say that, well, because you were looking at the Popeye VHS tapes.
The Gulliver ones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you, incidentally, I was checking a public domain Popeye VHS tape late last night, and I think it was from 1986, and I think it was some kind of public domain label from New Jersey. And surprisingly, the quality was pretty good on the Popeye Fleischer shorts. I mean, it was a 16 millimeter AAP TV print.
Right. Let me ask you, was that Amvest video?
I believe it was, because the tape actually belonged to my brother-in-law.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you have any thoughts on the film Gulliver's Travels, or any memories of it, or anything you'd like to share?
Well, I don't really know. Well, I personally haven't seen the movie, but I heard. I just wanted to ask: is that public domain?
Gulliver's Travels?
Yes.
Yes, it is, sir. That's why there's so many VHS and DVD and Blu-ray versions of the film.
Yeah, because I heard that the Fletcher properties are kind of the video rights are scattered all over the place.
Right. To the best of my knowledge, there are only about 2 Fleischer properties that are still held under copyright, and those would be 1938's Tears of an Onion, which is a color classic short, and the other would be their 1941 feature film, Mr. Bug Goes to Town, which has also been invariably released under numerous different titles, Hoppity Goes to Town, and then finally on the Legend Films DVD label, Bugville. Interestingly enough about Mr. Bug Goes to Town, let me talk about that film a little bit here. That film is practically seen as a precursor to Disney Pixar's A Bug's Life. So if you ever get a chance to see Mr. Bug, I highly recommend it to see where the direction that companies like Disney and Pixar were going, and see the influence there that was there with that film. Really, really a great film. I highly recommend it. Mr. Bug Goes to Town. I don't know when TCM, Turner Classic Movies, will show it again, but they do have a very nice print of the film, I do have to say. I remember back in, I believe it was 2012, they actually had a night of animation hosted by animation historian Jerry Beck and the late, great Robert Osborne. I sincerely miss him every day. Yes. Wonderful presenter on TCM. And they had a whole night's worth of animation. They showed some Fleischer shorts, I believe, some silent animation. They also did show Gulliver and Mr. Bug Goes to Town, which was surprising because I had actually never seen Gulliver on television before, surprisingly, considering its public domain status. And Mr. Bug I had never seen before, so that was actually quite a treat to see that. Really, really good film. Yeah. And then they also showed, I believe, later on some more silent animation. And they also showed later that night, I believe, the first ever animated feature ever produced. I believe by, I think it was an Austrian or German woman by the name of Lottie Renger. And that film was The Adventures of Prince Ahmed from, I believe, 1926. So before we gotta get running here, is there anything else you wanted to say before I let you go?
Yeah, I hate to get off topic, but speaking of Jerry Beck, he actually well, according to Stu Showtack's radio show, it said that Jerry Beck actually called out all the films because they kept ignoring his emails because they were doing those Betty Boop.
Oh yeah, those I remember caused quite the controversy because I think that the big issue that people took with those Olive Films issues were the fact that they were using the TV prints and not original theatrical prints.
Yeah, well, I actually heard that the master materials they used were 35 millimeter.
Well, that's good, but I also do think I remember hearing that Paramount or the NTA or UM&M or whoever, I think it was UM&M, unwisely altered the original prints instead of making copies. So they actually did alter the original prints of those films, which is sad now because it would be great to see those films in their original uncut, unedited Paramount Mountain form. But
I mean, unless of course Jerry actually unless they they go to another label or something. Unless they.
You know who I think would do a great job with that stuff, honestly, if given the opportunity? I think Shout Factory would do a great job with the Betty Boop material because Shout Factory has always proven themselves to be a really good, reputable label. Everything that they've churned out practically has been top-tier material and top-tier content. So I see no reason why, if they were to strike a deal with Paramount, why they couldn't issue something like that and get people like Jerry Beck involved. Another label, and I do have to say this, that has proven themselves to be very, very good and very, very reputable in their own right, would have to be Steve Stanfield's Thunderbeat Animation. I mean, say what you will, but he is a really good guy. He has restored countless animated shorts and animated features, and he's really made quite the name for himself, in especially film restoration, but more specifically, animation restoration circles. As a matter of fact, the clips that I'm going to be showing you from Gulliver today do come from his beautifully released Blu-ray of the film, which is what you see here. Now, I'm not sure if this is still in print. I think last time I checked, I think it was out of print. But this is a very, very good-looking release. Probably the best this film has ever looked. I highly recommend it if it's still in print. If not, I will have to talk with Mr. Stanfield about doing another run of these, because this is a really, really good run. And it does come with some good bonus cartoons and bonus features as well. So this is the highly recommended set. The only thing that I wish could have happened was I wish there could have been an audio commentary on this, because I am a nut for audio commentaries. I've always loved audio commentaries, but other than that, really, really good set. Must have if you're a fan of Gulliver's Travels or the Fleischer films in general. And it does also come with a nice book.
Yeah.
Really nice booklet. I don't know if I'm doing it justice there. But it does come with both DVD and Blu-ray. So really highly recommended. So yeah, I think that if they were to ever redo those sets again, I think they should strike a deal with somebody like Shout Factory, who's known for putting out good material, or somebody like Thunderbeat Animation, who quite frankly is, I think, doing probably the best job preserving classic sound animation today, especially from that golden era, because not many people nowadays are doing that. I think.
I honestly think, sorry to interrupt. I honestly think that Steve probably might do a better job, though.
I totally agree. I think Steve would do a better job than any of these other companies, because of the fact that, he's practically the only one going out there today and restoring these classic films. I mean, the thing is, Warner Brothers has been very, very lackluster on releasing classic animation.
Yeah.
I mean, it took them a while to release that Popeye set from the 1940s, and I'm going to give my own personal opinion. Now, again, this is just my personal opinion. This is not the opinions of my caller, necessarily the opinions of my callers or anybody else watching the program. But I feel they sort of dropped the ball on that Popeye set from Warner Brothers, because I feel that their Warner Archive label has always been, for stuff that they consider to be an afterthought or stuff that they don't think is going to sell well. I think that Popeye is still such a recognizable figure in pop culture, even today. I think a set of his cartoons would sell well, and I kind of wished, personally, that it had been patterned off of the previous three sets. Because I think that they did a wonderful job with those previous three Popeye sets, and now they come out with this famous studio set, and they're bare bones on DVD and Blu-ray Rs, and no features. And I don't know, to me it just feels like they dropped the ball because of the fact that there was a proposed CGI Popeye feature that was in the works by Samurai Jack and Dexter's Laboratory creator, Genndy Tartakovsky, but unfortunately, that project, as far as I know, was canceled. So they decided, you know what, this film isn't coming out, so we'll just put these cartoons out as an afterthought. And that's what it looked like to me. There's a Facebook page called the Bugs Bunny Video Guide, and I did get into a kind of a little bit of a scuffle with people over my opinions, but that's just the way I see it. Yes, I'm delighted that these films are finally being released. Yes, I'm delighted. I don't know. I just wish that there was a little bit more work put in. I just wish that there was more of a market for this type of material, because it's still really good material. It shouldn't be put to waste, and it shouldn't be considered an afterthought. Say what you will about the famous studio stuff, but a lot of these classic animated films were, there was a lot of work put into them, and they, were a stepping stone in animation history, so I don't think they should be forgotten, and I think they should be released with proper care, and I think that they shouldn't be considered afterthoughts. That's just my personal feeling.
Sorry to interrupt again. The Porky Pig shorts that they put on DVD recently. There was a lot of backlash over that.
Why? What happened? Did they use DVR or something?
They just put them on DVD, and I don't think any cleanup was involved with the rest.
Well, yeah, that's what I noticed with One Archive, and that's what they do. I'm a huge classic comedy fan as well, and because of that, I'm into the works of comedians like Burt Wheeler and Robert Woolsey, and Warner Archive have released a lot of their films, and even the releases of those films have taken considerable criticism, because it appears to me like there was no considerable amount of cleanup or restoration work done on those films either. So that's why I say the Warner Archive label is just a label for films that they don't think are going to sell well, so they don't put the work in. So they're just going to slap them on a disc and say, "There you go, there are your films."
Yeah, I think that's a little, yeah.
All right, I want to give other callers a chance to call in, and I want to play a few more clips. So, is there anything else you wanted to say before I let you go?
I just want to say you're doing a good job.
Thank you so much, sir, and have yourself a great day.
You too.
All right, bye-bye. That's what we're talking about. We got to preserve these classic animated films, and I guess that's why I brought out these tapes today, because a lot of these tapes of Gulliver's Travels, unfortunately, don't present the film in the best possible way. And I'm gonna say this, and people are gonna give me criticism for it. But until this edition came out in 1999, nobody had ever tried or attempted to do anything with these Fleischer films before. And I'm glad that somebody like Thomas R. Reich got the ball rolling. Say what you will about his process of placing sound effects on the cartoons. Say what you will about some of what he did. He tried something that nobody else was doing. People were just slapping these things on a disc and selling them to the lowest common denominator. There was actual work put into this restoration. So, regardless of what you think about Thomas R. Reich and his methods, he got the ball rolling, and he did a really good job on this issue. It's saying something, if the great Roger Ebert called this a video pick of the month back in 1999. So this was a really good stepping stone in film restoration. And that's why I'm proud to be friends with Mr. Reich to this day, because he did do a really good job on restoring these films. I just figured I would give you guys a chance to call in. if you'd like to call into the program, again, please feel free to do so. The number here is 860-613-3031. Again, that number is 860-613-3031. I would love to hear from you guys. I would love to talk with Gulliver fans all around the world. And by the way, I wanted to, say this, put a face to a name. I am the administrator of the Gulliver's Travels Facebook page on Facebook. I started it back in 2012, Max Fleischer's Gulliver's Travels. So if you go on to Facebook and you find the page, Max Fleischer's Gulliver's Travels, that actually is my page. I created that page back in 2012, and we have about now a good 798 likes. I'm very, very proud of that achievement. And hopefully I want to see us get to 1,000 by the end of the year. I think that, with the fact that there is the fact that the film's 80th anniversary is coming, I think it is good that we sort of celebrate this film and sort of get more attention brought to it. And coming up later on in this year, my buddy Cortland Hull, who actually was a guest on Geno in the Evening about 3 years ago, actually to this day, 3 years ago today, Cortland Hull was on Geno in the Evening. He's actually going to be showing Gulliver's Travels later on this year as part of his celebration of the year 1939 in film. So I'm being told that we only have about 5 minutes left of the program. I want to close out with a clip from Gulliver's Travels.
You and me, us and me, all across that road away. It's a happy day. Toodaloo-loo-loo-lay. The sun shines bright, the world's all right. It's a happy day.
It's a happy day. Toodaloo-loo-lay. For you and me, for us
And we
all across that road.
It's a happy day. Toodaloo-loo-lay. The sun shines bright, the world's all right. It's a happy day. Orange bells and beans are dancing on the bay.
Come on, where are those buttons?
It's a happy day. Toodaloo-loo-lay. You can't go wrong if you sing that song. It's a happy day.
Man, just even watching that clip, man, I still am in love with this movie. You know, say what you will about it. I am still such in love with this movie. The music is perfect. The animation is wonderful. The characters are lively. Gulliver himself is one of the best animated characters I've ever seen. You know, that's the rotoscope at work, people. For those of you who don't know, that's what the rotoscope was capable of doing. I mean, this was in the days before CGI and all of that. This is a remarkably, wonderfully put together film. Steve Stanfield, this is actually one of my first times seeing the restoration. I was a bit hesitant, admittedly, seeing it. But Steve Stanfield, you did one heck of a job on this restoration, sir. You are to be commended for it, man. Thank you for taking the time to restore this film. Keep up the good work. Hopefully we can see Mr. Bug from you in the future. Great work. Please, if this DVD is still available on Amazon, please consider purchasing it and supporting Thunderbean Animation. Wonderful disc here. All right, guys, I got to get running here. I'm being told I got to wrap up. I hope you all have a wonderful night. And make sure you all have a happy day now.